What a blessing it is to be here. Have you been having a good time so far this first day of the Values Voters Summit? You know, all day long we've been hearing this message. It's reinforced that we live in strategic times, don't we? Well, I am so excited to introduce our next speaker because he's a man I believe has been prepared especially by God for such a time as this. He's one of my heroes. I know of no other man that can quote and apply the Constitution, the Founding Fathers, and the Bible with equal ease and passion as does Judge Roy Moore. A great American. He's a great American success story, complete with the trials and tribulations. He was born and reared in rural Alabama without indoor plumbing. I didn't know that until today. But he graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point. Rose to the rank of captain, serving honorably our country in Vietnam. God bless those Vietnam vets, huh? When he came back, he graduated from the University of Alabama Law School and became eventually the Supreme Court Chief Justice for the state of Alabama. Not once, but twice, voted overwhelmingly by the people of Alabama. As he stood for the Constitution, the Ten Commandments, and the acknowledgement of God, and for the sanctity of marriages between one man and one woman. Now just try this on for size. Senator Judge Roy Moore. That has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Well, today, Alabama is poised to send Judge Roy Moore to the U.S. Senate to be the next senator to fill the seat left by Senator Jeff Sessions as he became the U.S. Attorney General, a man of character, conviction, and courage for such a time as this. Please help me welcome the next U.S. Senator from the great state of Alabama, Judge Roy Moore.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm sure happy to be here. It's a great-looking crowd, and I have to follow that lovely lady that just spoke. I was thinking as I was coming up here, really, I love Donald Trump as our president, and I would rather follow Donald Trump. Let me put it that way. I want to thank Walker Wildman and Tim, his dad, and Rob Chambers of the AFA, and Tony Perkins, the FRC, for letting me speak today. I want to talk to you a little bit about what's going on. And I'll start with a little poem from Charles Dickens in the 1800s. It was the best of times, and it was the worst of times. It was an age of wisdom and an age of foolishness. It was an epoch of belief and an epoch of incredulity, a season of light and a season of darkness. It was a spring of hope and the winter of despair. When Donald Trump was elected in November of 2016, shortly thereafter, we had a spring of great hope in the country. If you were like me, you felt a burden lifted from your soul. Of about what was about to happen in our country. But I believe God has a reason for that. He's given us a window of opportunity, a time when we can bring our nation back or see it suffer the consequences. And it's a time of action, not a time to sit and do nothing. Yes, it was a spring of hope, a day of enthusiasm, a day of light. No more despair. But what are we having today? What are we seeing happen with this new, nearly 1-year-old tenure? We're seeing not much being accomplished. Some things are good happening, but we're seeing a stagnancy in Washington, D.C. Many people are frustrated, and I think that frustration is going to have an effect in the coming 2018 elections. You know, I believe that we can make America great again. I believe we can build our strong military. We can have a thriving economy by removing regulations and taxes. You know, government is the greatest interference with the free enterprise system, and we need to get jobs back in our country. You know, Ronald Reagan once said the 9 most frightening words in our conversation was, "I'm from government and I'm here to help." That never changes because it's government. If they see the economy moving, they tax it. If they see it keep moving, they regulate it. And if it stops moving, they subsidize it. And that's about what's going to happen to health care if we're not careful. We need to stop illegal aliens coming across our borders, and I believe we can. You know, I got in a lot of trouble by saying it doesn't take a wall to stop illegal aliens. I went on to say, but if once we stop it with the military, then we build a wall when we get the money. We need to repeal Obamacare. We don't need to replace it. We need to stop the federal government from intruding into the states over regulation of their education. And we need to return to the United States Constitution if we're going to have any possibility of getting back. But having done all that, we need to make America good again. Now, people ask me when I say that, how can we make America good? Well, I'm going to tell you, it's easier done than said. That wasn't a mistake. It is easier done than said. We return the knowledge of God to our land, and God will heal our land. We don't need to make it complicated. We can't change the heart. Somebody asked me this afternoon, how can we do this? And I said, it's simple. Recognize God. Acknowledge God again. It's not complicated. It's easier done than said. We know to go back to our Constitution and the source of our rights. My goodness, if we forgot that those inalienable rights come from God, not from man. We've got to go back to the basis of our morality, which is in God, not man. Our politicians today, and I've been politicking out there, they never talk about morality. They never talk about healing the heart by bringing back God, because we've lost that connection. In Hosea chapter 4, the prophet said, "Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of Israel." I think that same message could be true today. Hear the word of the Lord, ye children of America, for the Lord hath a controversy with the inhabitants of this land, because there's no truth, nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. By swearing and lying and killing and stealing they break forth, and blood toucheth blood. Therefore shall the land mourn, and every one that liveth therein shall languish. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Because thou hast rejected knowledge, I will also reject thee, that thou shalt not be no priest to me. Because thou hast forgotten the law of thy God, I will also forget thy children. As they were increased, so they sinned against me. Therefore will I change their glory into shame. We need to go back to recognize that God still has the same message for America today. Why have we had instances like in Las Vegas where 58 people were killed? In Orlando, 49 people were killed. In Virginia Tech, some 32. In Washington's farewell address, he addressed morality. Back then, they knew what they had to do, and they said it was virtue or morality which is a necessary spring of popular government. This rule indeed extends with more or less force to every species of free government. Who that is a sincere friend to it can look with indifference on attempts to shake the foundation of our fabric. Our foundation has been shaken. It's been shaken to the core because we have forgotten the source of our morality. You know, I wonder how this happened. So I look back in history, I look back in law, and I discovered something, that we are like sheep, blindly following without knowing the course we're taking. I don't know how many of you have ever lived on a farm. Let me see your hands. How many of you have ever walked in a pasture and saw a cow path? Now, I'm from Alabama. I'm not saying our cows are smarter. But I did hear someone say they heard two cows talking the other day in the field. And the first cow said to the second cow, it said, cow, have you heard about the new disease going around? And the second cow said, I haven't heard about any disease. So the first cow looked at him and said, well, it's a terrible disease. It makes people forget where they came from, or where they're going. Second cow says, I haven't heard about any disease. This first cow said, why, cow, it's going to destroy our whole population. It'll kill us. We can't even know who we are anymore. The second cow looked at him and said, why should I worry? I'm a rabbit, and started hopping across the field. We might laugh, but that is exactly what we in America are doing. We're like rabbits. We run instead of taking a stand. I probably don't deserve the praise that I was given earlier about taking a stand, because to me, it's easy. You do what's right. One day through the primeval wood, a calf walked home, as good calves should, but left a trail all bent askew. A crooked trail, as all calves do. And since then, 250 years have fled. And I infer that the calf is dead, but still he left behind this trail. And thereby hangs my moral tale. If you've ever gone to a pasture, you'll see a little crooked trail a calf will walk, around a rock, around a tree, down a hill, up a hill. They don't walk in a straight line. This little poem, written by Sam Walter Foss in the 1940s, has a definite meaning for our country today. Because I see it in our leadership that follow blindly those in front of them. This is a moral tale. You see, that trail was taken up next day by a lone dog that passed that way. Then a wise bellwether sheep pursued the trail o'er vale and steep and drew the flock behind him too, as good bellwethers always do. From that day on, across hill and glade, through those old woods, a path was made. And many men wound in and out, and bent and dodged and turned about, and uttered words of righteous wrath, because 'twas such a crooked path. But still they followed, do not laugh, the first migrations of that calf. The crooked path became a lane that bent and turned again. The crooked lane became a road where many a poor horse with his load traveled on beneath the burning sun and traveled some 3 miles in one. And thus you see, for a century and a half, men trod the footsteps of that calf. Time passed by with swiftness fleet. That little road became a village street. And this, before men were aware, a city's crowded thoroughfare. Then the central street was this of a renowned metropolis. And for 2 centuries and a half, men trod the footsteps of that calf. Each day 100,000 route followed the zigzag calf about, and o'er his crooked journey went the traffic of a continent. Each day 100,000 men were led by one calf, now 3 centuries dead. And they followed still his crooked way and lost 100 years a day. For thus you see such reverence lent to well-established precedent. You see, when the other side sets a precedent like health care, where do the Republicans go? Where is the promise to repeal Obamacare? Who put this repeal and replace? Are we going to allow the government to take over healthcare industry when today in the USA today you see the problems they're having with the VA hospitals? How blind have we been to let them come into our education system and teach our children? When are we going to stop this foolishness of blindly following? Our forefathers knew better. James Madison said, "It is proper to take alarm at the first experiment on our liberties. The freemen of America did not wait to usurp power, had strengthened itself by exercise, and entangled the question in precedent. They saw all the consequences in the principle, and they avoided the consequences by denying the principle. We revere this lesson too much too soon to forget it." We have forgotten it. We have forgotten that when you take a step in and you put your other foot in, the first thing you know, it engulfs you and it sucks you down. It's not just a swamp, it's a quicksand. And that's what we see in Washington. We don't have leadership. We have followership. And we've got to get back to we understand what our founding fathers did and what they stood for. A moral lesson this might teach. Were I ordained and called to preach, for men are prone to go it blind along the path of the mind. They toil on from sun to sun just to do what other men have done. They follow well that beaten track and out and in and forth and back, and still their devious course pursue just to keep the path that others do. But how that wise, O God, doth laugh who saw that first primeval calf. A moral lesson this might teach, but I'm not ordained or called to preach. A lot of people think that what I stand for is religious. They ask me, well, what's all this talk about God? Don't you know God's not acceptable in this system of political arena? Well, I'm going to tell you, when you forget God, you can forget politics. When you forget God, you forget, just like it says, your heritage, your rights, your freedoms. For me, it's a question of freedom or slavery. This is an awful moment for our country. Should I keep back my opinions at such a time as this, I would consider myself guilty of treason toward my country and an act of disloyalty toward the majesty of heaven, which I revere above all earthly kings. It is natural for man to indulge in the illusion of hope. We are apt to shut our eyes against the painful truth and listen to the song of the siren till she has bound us hand and foot. Shall we gather strength by our resolution and action? Shall we acquire the means of effectual resistance by lying supinely on our back and hugging the delusive phantom of hope until our enemies have bound us hand and foot? We must act. We must fight. And appeal to God is our only hope. We've got to go back to God. We've got to go back to the Constitution. Yes. And if we don't, we'll be gone. Or we sing the songs. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesties above the fruited plains. America, America, God shed his grace on thee and bound thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, America, the beautiful. Or so you used to be. Land of the pilgrim's pride, I'm glad they're not here to see. Babies piled in dumpsters, abortion on demand. Oh, sweet land of liberty, your house is on the sand. Your children wander aimlessly, poisoned by cocaine, choosing to indulge their lust when God has said abstain. From sea to shining sea, this nation is turned away from the teaching of God's law and the need to always pray. So many worldly pastors telling lies about a rock, saying God's going broke so that they can fleece the flock. And we've kept God in our temples. How foolish have we grown when all the earth is but his footstool and heaven is his throne. voting in governments that are rotting to the core, choosing godless judges who throw reason out the door. Too soft to put a killer in a well-deserved tomb, but brave enough to kill that child before he leaves the womb. And you think that God's not angry? That this land's a moral slum? How much longer will it be before his judgment comes? And how can we face our God from whom we cannot hide? What is left for us to do but to stem this evil tide? For if we who are his children will humbly turn and pray, if we seek his holy face and mend our evil way, then God will hear from heaven. He'll forgive us of our sin. He'll heal this sickly land and all that live within. But America, the beautiful, if you don't, you'll see. Sad but holy God, withdraw his hand from thee. May God bless you. Thank you.